Hi, everyone. I am Shakira with the Love and Money Podcast. Today, I'm just going to talk to you about what is going on with America as far as the debt level. It has reached $30 trillion for the first time. So, this is one of the things that is in the headlines. And this is the result of the government borrowing money, basically, borrowing money to keep the stock market afloat. And also because of the COVID-19 pandemic, they have been borrowing more money than usual. Also, creating money to send people stimulus checks. So, all of these things together have caused America to be have a debt surpassing $30 trillion for the first time. And so the debt was at 7 trillion by the end of 2019, but currently it is over 30 trillion. And so this is the first time this has happened. Like I said, this is in the headlines. So as you know, we have inflation going on where the prices are higher than they usually are. And how does the debt impacts other things? It impacts other things when America is in more debt. It impacts other things because it allows you to spend less money on the other things such as climate change, national security, things like that. So what happens is the government they owe $8 trillion to the foreign and international investors led by Japan and China. So this will fall on the taxpayers in the future because this money has to be paid back and it will be paid back with interest to Japan and China. So basically, what they are saying is that America will be ending up paying the retirement plans of Japan and China because they have borrowed $8 trillion from them, foreign and international investors, Japan and China. So ultimately, the debt is a result of the pandemic, but it's accumulation of a whole bunch of different things resulting from the government consistently borrowing money. And like I said, it has surpassed $30 trillion for the first time, and it has hit the headlines. And so, what they do is they measure what is called the GDP, and GDP is the gross domestic product. And so, I'm going to try to break that down to you because you hear that term a lot, GDP, but what does that actually mean? So, the GDP uh, it has surpassed the gross domestic product has surpassed 100% years ahead of schedule. So they have a schedule. They have a schedule on where we should be at, and they use the GDP. So we are ahead of this schedule, which is something that is not wanted. People don't want them to be ahead of the schedule. They want them to be exactly on the schedule. So instead of behind schedule, instead of being on schedule, we're ahead of schedule, which is something that is not wanted. So I'm going to try to break down what GDP is. Basically, this is something that is measured on an annual basis, and sometimes it is measured on a quarterly basis. And what it does is it signifies the economic health of the country. How healthy is this country? And so GDP, it has a calculation to it. And what they're basically doing is they're adding up the spending. And so the calculation is C plus G plus I plus NX equals GDP. So it's basically adding up all the spending. So they take a calculation of all the consumer spending. How much have the consumers spent this year? Government spending. How much has the government spent this year? Business capital spending. And then the last factor is the net exports, the amount of exports minus imports. So there's four different sections of spending that they're looking at to come up with the GDP. And they take this number and they use this number to decide if we are in a healthy state or if we're not in a healthy state. They take this number and they compare it to other countries to see if we are growing or if we are shrinking. And then they manipulate this number to try to get us back to a state of economic health. And so, to make it a little bit clearer, I'm going to try to give an example. So, say the GDP is negative, is declining. And so, a clear cut example of a negative GDP is a recession. So, we all know what a recession is. So, a recession is an example of a negative GDP. And that means that the country is not healthy economically. It's a negative GDP in a recession. So, what they do is they manipulate this GDP and they manipulate it by lowering the interest rates and giving out stimuluses in an attempt to get the country back to a state of health. If, on the other hand, we have a positive GDP, they would manipulate that by raising interest rates. So essentially, it's a calculation that they do every year. Sometimes they do it on a quarterly basis. And they want to make sure that the country is healthy economically. And they use it to compare themselves with other countries to see if we are growing as a country or if we are shrinking as a country. They also look at increasing GDP as an increased standard of living. So, like I said before, GDP, it's a gauge to see how healthy the country is economically. And so that's where we're at right now. America is in debt, surpassing $30 trillion for the first time. And this will affect where they decide to spend money on other things, such as national security, climate change, and then all the other things that they are normally spending their money on. So I just wanted to come in and try to break down some definitions for you. GDP, let you know what's going on with the state of the country, its economic health, and where we're at as far as the country goes. So this is the Love and Money podcast with Shakira. If you like this podcast, please share it with one other person and have a great night.